Thank you very much, by the way, Lopa, for your introduction. As she said, I am lecturer at the University of Aberdeen School of Law. I just moved jobs and continents, so that's why the empty library is my second day here. But if you are interested also in research in law, technology, regulation, economics, and society for developing countries, today we won't talk about that, but I'm still engaged also in that kind of trend of research. So probably that would be subject of conversation for another time. So today, let me share my screen. As Lopa said, I'm going to talk to you about algorithmic curation and the marketplace of ideas. So let me start the slideshow. There you go. All right. So so what I would like to divide our conversation today into three parts. In the first part, I would like to introduce you to the concept of a marketplace of ideas, and I would like to also to discuss how this marketplace for ideas looks today. So in practice, what do we have today as our new marketplace for ideas? Then we will look at the economy of this marketplace for ideas. How it's structured, what are the revenue sources, and how it is changing. And the third part instead will mostly analyze the different regulatory and legal options that we have to solve some of the negative externalities and issues and problems that have been created especially in the last 20 years or so in these markets. But I don't want to really this to become an excessively legalistic analysis of these problems. I would mostly like actually to engage your curiosity and your minds on mostly the ethical, moral, and public policy issues regarding the impact of these technologies on democracy as a whole, on society and democracy as a whole. So that's pretty much where I would like to focus and end our conversation, so that probably you will have also more questions. I know we were just talking a moment ago about the the problems of having this kind of seminars at 2 p.m. That probably is enough time for some of you. I really don't want to put you to sleep with too much legal stuff. So I know that that's usually not fun for anyone, not even for lawyers. But let's start it. So what do we mean for a marketplace for ideas? Well, we don't find these exact words in Areopagitica, John Milton's Areopagitica, but most philosophers, historians, and economists tend to trace back this concept to John Milton's work. He was in particular he wrote the Areopagitica to criticize a regulatory proposal, a law that wanted to introduce a system of licenses to print whatever book. So if you wanted to print a book and distribute it, you needed to get a license that wasn't very easy to take if this law was obviously enacted. And Milton harshly and firstly criticized this law, saying that ideas shouldn't be subject to such kind of regulatory limitations, because they should be let compete against each other, because it's only through this competition between ideas that the truth eventually wins and comes out. So the marketplace for ideas as we mean it today is mostly based on, it's mostly a metaphor based on the blueprint of the neoclassical price theory idea of a market competition between products and services. So what they say is that the less regulation there is, there should be as less regulation as possible. Because ideas, just like products, should be competing against each other. And through this competition, the people, just like consumers, will choose the best idea, just like consumers choose the best product, right? So that's pretty much the modern idea of a marketplace of ideas. However, this idea is based on a number of assumptions. Among these assumptions, there is that people choose ideas and exchange ideas based on a principle of full irrationality. So they are all fully rational speakers and listeners, that they all have complete information, and that there is a full symmetric information, a symmetry of information among speakers and listeners. Actually, the assumptions are more than just these three, but these are probably the most important. As you may imagine, this is a purely fictional world that definitely doesn't reflect what is reality around us. You just have to open Facebook, Twitter, or whatever website to realize that even just these three assumptions are absolutely out of the real world. So what does it mean? Let's try indeed to translate this concept, the marketplace for ideas, that initially was actually intended to be a good metaphor for letting people exchange ideas freely without barriers, without restrictions, without being authorized in advance to talk about whatever topic that they wanted to share with others. Let's see what it means, this concept, for today's informational environment. And here I would like to ask you, where do you find your news? So now I would like to share with you a second a survey on the chat. So what I will do is to simply paste on the chat, in the chat box, a link. No worries, it's just a Microsoft form, so it shouldn't. It's nothing. It's not a virus. It's not a malware. I would like you to take 2 minutes. It's just one question to understand where do you get your news from, and how do you source your news? Please let me know if you have problems at accessing this Microsoft form. Great. Thank you, Anthony.
Claudio, just a quick thing. I think you said that you can select up to 3. You can select only 1.
Oh gosh. Okay, I'm so sorry. It's the first week I'm using Microsoft for doing these kind of things. So just choose one, please, and we will just the most important for you. I'm very sorry for that. It will make sense anyway, so. Okay, so I think that we can already start looking at the starts of your answers. They are completely anonymized, so no worries. I won't be able to see what you said, but apparently then we have a pretty even distribution among newspapers, aggregators, emails, mobile alerts. Apparently, no one really likes very much searching for news. Social media. There are two that chose social media, and yeah, with up to 3, we would have had a more critical mass of to understand the data. But that's pretty much it's a pretty well distributed sample. And let's take a look now at the wider society. So let's compare your answers with what all right. So what the wider society has answered on actually a much more complex, obviously, survey, but on a similar survey. So regarding all ages, we see that so this is only for online news, all right? So this was a survey regarding only online news, asking where do you find your news online? And we see that 25% access directly the newspaper's website, 26 access it instead through social media, 25 instead decide to search it online, while mobile alerts, aggregators, and emails are still lagging behind. However, we see that this situation changes with age. So the under 35 tend to extensively use more social media and slightly more also aggregators. I have to say that in particular aggregators, it depends a lot on the geography, because for example, when in the United States and in Japan even more, they are quite, more popular than, for example, in Germany or in Italy. Overall in the world, they are still not that popular. While social media is picking up pretty much across the world. So this is, well, hold on, okay. This is based on what I call algorithmic curation. So what do we mean by this? All these technologies allows, all these technologies have replaced, to a certain extent, traditional newspapers in organizing and sorting out and disseminating content. So what they do is that they decide what should be seen first and what should be seen actually at all from a specific reader at all times. And this happens on all these different types of display, on all these different types of technologies. So search has a ranking algorithm that will that adapts actually to a single user. Aggregators, they have been designed exactly to tailor the news of the day and the information in general to the specific user. And social network, we all know that have different algorithms, but they still do the same thing. They, for example, Facebook, they sort out and curate our content, being the the post of our friends or the article of the New York Times. But what Facebook does, it decides whether we should see that article or not, and how to prioritize, and whether one has the priority over the other. This whole economy, though, seems to be for free, seems to be freely accessible by anyone at any time. Actually, it's not completely for free. We already know that. Probably you already know that because you have probably read it by the way, many newspapers and blogs and whatnot. But it's mainly baked up and financed by advertisements. Okay. So indeed, these platforms, in particular Google and Facebook, but the other platforms too, they have as their most important source of revenue advertisement. So for Facebook, for example, 98% roughly of its revenues are from advertisements. So this is, though, a system that is not completely new for the news business. Actually, Benjamin Day, at the beginning of the 19th century, came up with this idea. He wanted to compete in New York in the market for newspapers. There were already very well established incumbents, in particular the New York Times and another couple, that were the New York newspapers, right? So they were based mostly on the sales that were making at the kiosks. So you had to pay for the copies. The business was you pay for the copy and you get a copy, right? That's all. Benjamin Day, instead, he realized that he could compete by just giving these copies of his New York Sun for free. What was the source of his revenues? Well, just advertisement. So in 1833, Benjamin Day came up with this idea, and it was immediately successful. After him, radio and television adopted this idea and adapted it obviously to the medium, because it needs obviously important adaptations. And the internet has somehow transformed this idea, probably in a way that though has never been seen before. Why that? Because the current type of digital advertising, which is called programmatic advertising on the internet, looks very different from the very first advertising banners that we have seen, that we've seen in the 90s. Indeed, programmatic advertising is so complex that is now also highly centralized. Why is it this complex? Well, because it uses technologies that are able to collect information about each single user from multiple sources at the same time, and re-elaborate them in order to give to offer and sell advertisement that is as tailored to each single user as possible. So this type of practice is called segmentation or pigeonholing of users. And the main actors today, so you will see that there are many different parties involved into this process in these markets. However, there are few gatekeepers, and among them we all know the main gatekeepers: Google, Facebook, but also Amazon in certain markets now, and these gatekeepers manage to maintain that position because they managed to be a sort of last repository of information for all these third parties that constellate their universe. To explain these concepts in a slightly more empirical way, a few years ago I decided to run this study. So I used a simple Firefox extension called Lightbeam to track all the cookies and other links while visiting 100 newspapers websites that I selected in advance. There were 25 websites from the most important 25 newspapers from 4 different countries, obviously. And by doing so, my computer detected connection to 693 third parties, and the two main connections were to DoubleClick and Facebook. So as you can see, DoubleClick received more than twice as the connections than the number of newspapers that the website that I connected to. And while Facebook, practically speaking, received connections thanks to the super button, they call it, from practically speaking all the newspapers that I visited. So why did I want to do this? Well, because I wanted to test empirically this idea that there are many different third parties that are helping to shape these new advertising model, in particular in the news sector, but that there are some of these that are the gatekeepers, the real gatekeepers of these of this informational universe about readers and what they want and what they don't want. Apparently, these was successful as in proving this, but I actually never published it. So I would be very happy to receive criticisms, questions, and perhaps replicate the study, although this extension is not working anymore. So I know that there are some developers that took it back and tried to use it again, but it seems to not to be working really properly now. So, but what impact did these have on the industry? Well, we see that I don't have much time. It's already 25 minutes, so we'll try to speed up. So we'll see that while the advertising revenue is growing tremendously, especially in the last 10 years or so, has been really one of the most fast-growing industries in the world. And you can see it from these two researchers, one from AAB, ran by the PwC, and also these other one by the same, is taken from the same reports. You can see that newspapers total revenues are experiencing an inverse trend. So while overall that industry is thriving, the newspapers that are mostly relying on that same industry that is thriving are actually seeing their revenues plunging. So why is this? Well, and here are some more numbers actually showing the situation of newspapers, where showing the total number of newsroom employees in the sector. So we know that there has been an enormous amount of layoffs in the newspaper sector, But there have been also lots of newspapers closing in the same uh, um, period. So you see that in the last 15 years, there have been more than 2,500 newspapers closing only in the United States, right? And we see these trends pretty much all over the world. So why is this? Well, that is actually the gist of many of the papers written by especially economists in this sector. They are very often very ideologized. So there is who says, look, this is free market. Newspaper just can't keep pace with with the changing technologies. They were still in the 20th century, and they pretended to just write the news and sell them on paper. That's not how it works. Some others instead say, no, they try to change, but there are dominant players that are abusing their dominance to get as much, to extract as much rents as possible from these markets and from the players that are, and from all the stakeholders in the market. But besides this clash between economies, let's take a look at what has been already proven by economists, right? So we are just looking not at speculation, but what has been already proven. So what happens when newspapers close? Well, it's been proven that empirically that there is an increase in corporate misconduct. It's been also proven that there is a decrease in local government performance and increase in wasteful spending, and also that there are higher informational frictions. This is something that we could guess, right? Because we know that journalism, especially investigative journalism and local journalism, have a key role in keeping the power the governments, but also the business, so private and public power in check, right? So they have this important role to prevent even misconducts from happening. Because unfortunately, justice can be triggered only when it's too late, right? When something has already been done, and not even always. Journalism instead can keep these powers in check even before they do something bad. And so
what's an informational friction? Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, very good question. Informational frictions is when getting information becomes more expensive. Yeah, it's true. This is a term used by economists in the financial sector. So financial economists, they just mean that. So it's when getting information becomes more expensive, then all of that is informational friction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so
and also maybe, do you know how they've managed to prove a causal relationship in these cases? Maybe that's too tangential, but
yeah, so the methods used in these two papers, because these actually are two different papers, are different. However, they all used, if I'm not mistaken, Gao. They used a econometric study based on a number of case studies across the US. So they, I would suggest that you go straight to the paper, because me too, I should refresh my memory by looking exactly at what data they extrapolated. But they are both very good publication, peer-reviewed publications. So they should be, they have been peer-reviewed and they should be replicable. So, and while Hesse, I can't remember exactly if it was another econometric study or I remember that they mixed qualitative and quantitative approaches to understand, corporate misconduct. But to be honest, I can't remember exactly if it was an econometric study or any other approach to corporate misconducts and newspapers closures. But if you cannot find the papers, please let me know. I would be happy to share them with you, because I have them all. And they actually then in these papers also mention they have a literature review where you can look at all the important literature preceding these papers that kind of from different perspectives more or less demonstrated the same thing, right? Okay, so I hope this was helpful. I'm sorry if I couldn't give you all the relevant information for this. And but so from so we know that either from empirical studies or just from our gut feeling, we know that the current situation may create to some extent negative externalities and problems, let's call them less technically problems for the economy and society as a whole. So did lawyers think about that, and did they try to solve this problem or at least tackle it with the existing laws? Yes, but were they successful? We will see. So the tool that has been used so far more actively to solve this problem has been to create new intellectual property rights for news publishers. So the idea, especially in Europe, is the following. The government didn't want to intervene directly in the sector by forcing digital platforms to pay newspapers for using their content, because what digital platforms do is that they don't create anything. They just reorganize content created by someone else. So there were many groups asking for levies to be directly taken from digital platforms for the use of this content. The governments actually were very reluctant to do so. So they decided actually to adopt these, especially in Europe, they decided to adopt this directive saying that newspapers have a special right to ask platforms to pay for their content. What is this? Is simply a copyright license. So they have now the power to license out these copyrighted material that they have on their websites and ask money, obviously, in exchange for it, right? However, this idea was criticized since the very beginning from a very, conceptual perspective, very legalistic perspective, from an economic perspective. But actually, my problem at the beginning with these, more than being, highly conceptual, was the enforcement. I wasn't really sure, and I wrote about that, about how they could really enforce these against platforms if they, since most of the newspapers were in a situation of economic dependence from this, or at least technological dependence from this platform. Since I have worked for a pretty long time in law firms, I know what it means. And indeed, the French case well summarizes these the problems of enforcing this law for newspapers. What happened in a nutshell? It happened that the French government immediately implemented this directive, but as a result, Google said, okay, I don't want any more of your content. So if you don't give me access to your content for free, I will not put it in my search engine. Just as simple as that. It won't appear in my search engine. It won't appear in Google News. It won't appear anywhere. Obviously, all newspapers accepted to give access to Google to their content for free, but actually at that point, Google has access to even more content than what they had access before. So to full access to all the content that they had. So paradoxically, their situation ended up being worse than it was before the enactment of this law. So another solution that was envisaged was superior bargaining power, but also these entails use of litigation, which is again the same problem. So you need to have a newspaper that has the guts to sue Google or Facebook in a court. That is very difficult, and it did never happen. These laws are already there, but nobody did that. So competition law is actually the last resort. Is practically speaking, most of the cases that you see around are competition authorities going against digital platforms. However, here there is another problem. That's this instrument. What allows you to do is to act and solve this problem only ex post. So after a problem has already arisen. So after a damage has already been done. So do you abuse your dominant position? Did you abuse of your dominant position? Yes. Okay. So now we can do something to remedy to this problem. So there are many proposals to add, improving the regulation of this sector, or anyway solving the problems either of the newspapers and of the economy as the economy as a whole. Some of these proposals regard the regulation of this sector, and we will see in a slide one of them. I will be done in 1 minute. Some other proposal might be even more daring, more radical. For example, what about banning online behavioral advertisement? I would like to know from you, like I'm trying to provoke you, or what about some others instead have us to impose impose the payment of certain standard amounts to impose these on digital platforms. Softer remedies would be instead to have state subsidies for investigative and local journalism. And already other legal solutions have been implemented on the side of privacy and data portability, but they had very little effect actually. One of these proposals that is regard purely the technological side of it is the one by Fukuyama and this group of researchers at Stanford, who proposed to create a middleware, which is another piece of technology that rides on top of an existing platform and can modify the presentation of underlying data. Practically speaking, it would be another platform, independent, actually a group of platforms, independent, that would allow users to choose what information is curated and filtered from them. However, do you remember Milton? He didn't really believe that we should be able to say and have access to say and publish whatever we want. He believed in regulation of speech, even Milton. But taking in particular taking in particular into consideration the limitations of our understanding of the world around us, our biases, and our so-called, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, bounded rationality. So the limits of our rationality. Do you think that society should be protected by itself through regulation? If so, how? Or however, what would you do if you were the regulator? Would you leave the decision of how news and information should be disseminated completely to people or to technology, both or none of them? So what would you do? Thank you very much. So I hope I'm in time. I think that I was supposed to finish at this time. So if I'm late, I'm very sorry. But I would really love to know what you think about these. And please go on with criticism and comments.
Thank you, Claudia. You are well within the time. And we still have people over here. So I think this is a question and answer round. So if anybody is interested in asking any questions, so now will be the good time, please. I do see quite a few claps coming in.
Thank you.
And I don't see anybody asking any questions though, but you did explain very well though.
Thank you. But I would really like to ask you these questions. If you want, we can go back to my previous slides and I would be happy to really share with you these questions. So we can flip the Q&A and I'm going to be, so do you think that society can and should be protected by itself through regulation? What I mean by this is, for example, fake news. Let's make it even more real, right? So we know that social platforms, social networks have favored through their algorithms, not directly fake news, but sources that were mostly disseminating fake news, not because they love fake news, but because apparently they were engaging more the users of their platforms. And so they could make more money out of that, right? So for example, regarding fake news, we know that they may have an important negative impact on society, on elections, for example, on democracy. But we also know that apparently people love it because they engage more with that than with real news. For example, investigative journalism that have been demoted on Facebook tremendously because they realized that they weren't really engaging that much people. Do you think that we should protect society by itself, let's put it like this, by enforcing, for example, Facebook to prioritize investigative journalism over fake news? Do you think that we should do this?
Even if you do that, I don't think it's a possible way of doing it because there are people, there are different sorts of people. How do you control people's thoughts in this? And when you're asking if society can be protected, I think it's a very difficult question in itself because everybody has got an opinion about things. So you may believe in something, somebody else believes in something. So you are trying to protect them from fake news. So what is fake to you may not be fake to them. It's again going back to the conspiracy theories of things. So it's just a very, very difficult to measure. I don't think there can be any measurement on this. You can't have measurements on people's thoughts. So to control this or to, put it in a small kind of box or something, I personally feel it will be a very difficult job to do that.
Exactly. So here comes my connected and following question. So what do you think about this new role of social networks and platforms of filtering the information that we have access to? So they now have this power by law in many countries all over the world to decide, to fact check, right? So they have obviously algorithms and also real people that kind of double check their fact checking algorithms that tag a post and and decide whether the post is truthful or not, right? Let's put it like that. So what do you think about this? Now now we have a private organization that is fact-checking and which means censoring, practically speaking, and deciding what can be read and what cannot be read by me. So it's not only curating my my information, but it's also telling me whether that piece of information that I'm seeing in that moment is true or not, is fake news or is good news, right? What do you think about that? So we don't have state regulation, but we have private quasi-censorship. Do you think that that is right? We should.
I think I've heard about that. I think they have it in China also, and they do have it some parts of Muscat, where they monitor the kind of news people should get and people shouldn't get. I don't know whether that's private or not, but yeah, that's a thought. But again, you could. I think it works well when it is enforced on people that these are the fact news. Now, people will always find a way of getting around it also in terms of what they believe in, what I'm trying to say. But in controlling the society as a whole, so that is an idea of kind of having to check whether it's a fact or a fiction.
Yeah, I think it could be also quite like dangerous if we have a company that can decide what is right and what is wrong. Like hopefully if it's done in an optimal way where we know if facts are true or not, and we can say, but I guess often it's quite subjective. And then if there's an external company that's going to be able to tell you, well, this is wrong, you shouldn't believe this. And maybe that's just their view on the matter and not like everyone's view. So I guess it's quite a hard subject.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking away the democracy, I think, in some way, where you're asking people to believe in this is the fact and this is a fiction. So you're taking away that right in some way or the other. As I said, that everybody has got their thoughts and their thinking. And again, restricting people, I think that makes them more rebellious to want things. So just a small example, in Muscat, they have taken away, you cannot make WhatsApp call. So it's banned. I think in Dubai also is banned. So what they have a VPN and they kind of call up and they can do that. So that is going around the government.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been in many developing countries, and VPN is the first thing that you have to figure out how to use it. And but in the technology part, going back to filtering and censorship, I would like to know something else from you. I guess you have other 5 minutes, right?
Yeah,
so, sure. So most of these platforms are filtering out our content through their algorithms. So, for example, what happened to me once, a few years ago now, I posted on my Facebook page a link to a website that was kind of recreating what happens in the what happens on a Facebook server when you scroll through your Facebook page. So in practice, they were showing you the data that they have access to. That, for example, not only the likes that you do to different pages, but also how long you linger on a single page. They have access to a lot of data, and that website was kind of recreating that environment, right? The post was immediately removed by Facebook. When I messaged them, I was really outraged. I messaged them. They told me that their algorithm thought it was pornography. So they defended themselves. I said there wasn't even one human being in that video. Yeah, because it was a video of it. There was not even one human being. How could you see anything pornographic in a video where there is not even one human being? But to have it back on my Facebook page, I have to threaten them to sue them. I'm a lawyer, obviously. I always do that. but I had the ground actually to do that. But so, what do you think about these? About platforms using plain always discard. It wasn't us, it was the algorithm. Right. So do you think that algorithms should be, I mean, can and should control also these very socially, these fundamental social hubs, right? So do you really think, or perhaps the middleware solution, the one of the Stanford professor Fukuyama, is better, where you decide by yourself what you have access to? So you have complete control over the filtering options, and you decide it by yourself, rather than an algorithm doing that for you. What do you think about this?
World will become a better place, I mean, if an algorithm is able to decide whether it's a legit content or not a legit content. So I mean, in an utopia, I believe if you have something like this, it's brilliant. But as you said, that algorithm, they cannot identify whether it is correct or it is not. Maybe there's 1% wrong somewhere. So, and if it is a human being who's trying to do this, again, you're giving a power to a human being to kind of do it. Either way, it works either way, sort of a thing. I mean, I would like it in some way, personally, but maybe I wouldn't like it in other ways. It's kind of, dictating me what I should like and what I shouldn't like, or what I should hear and what I shouldn't hear. So the depth of knowledge, I think we may deprive people of that, who wants to judge for themselves what is right and what is wrong. So what is a fake news and what is a legit news? It's kind of, again, as I'm saying, that it's personally, I may feel it that way, but if you're trying to kind of put it across the world, but there has to be something, an algorithm which is 100% accurate, not detecting, like there is no pornography in that, but it had detected there is something like that. So you've got to be kind of, give guarantee that this is legit and this is what it is going to be, and taking it forward. You can try it in a small society, I think. I don't think, although if you do it, I don't think you will have 100% agreement over there also.
Yeah, I think it's good to have algorithms that can decide what is content that should be seen, or if it's pornographic content. But I guess in your example, there was clearly an issue where I don't believe it's the algorithm that decided that, but Facebook is hiding behind the fact that they have the power to just say that because it's the algorithm, they can just remove whatever they want. And here clearly you had something that showed that how Facebook behaves, and they don't want everyone to know that. So they just remove it and claim that's the algorithm. So I guess, yeah, there should be more control about verifying that, the reasons. If something is banned, it should actually be banned because the algorithm said so. But I guess it's really hard to check. You need some companies that come. I don't know how they could actually check, but yeah, it would be good. I think that would be a good balance. Remove the power of the companies that can just hide behind having an algorithm.
Yeah. So probably from this conversation, we have to take that probably the Fukuyama's proposal of creating a number, not one, but a number of independent external middlewares that are mediating through algorithms this content, so that they are completely independent from the platform that hosts this content, right? And are also completely independent, for example, from the blogs and newspapers that create the content, might really be a good alternative. Though how it works, how you do that, that's probably, as you were saying, probably more complicated. Conceptually, it sounds very fascinating, but then when you have to implement it, probably is not as simple as it sounds. Actually, also Fukuyama admits that. But yeah, that's probably something that, especially you guys that understand much better than me the technology, you might want to explore.
Yeah, and I guess the problem is, even if we start having companies that can decide, can curate the news, let's say, well, yeah, I don't know. So would that be like the news everywhere on internet, or would that be only on some platform? Because I guess Facebook is quite happy right now to have a lot of fake news, and like many, for them, they make money out of it. So
yeah,
and they don't really care, I guess, about if people read the real news or not. They just want money because that's how it is.
Exactly. But they are not evil. They just want money, as you say. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's quite hard to enforce on them. And everyone wants to use Facebook, right? I mean, lots of people are leaving, but just maybe not Facebook, but in general, people have social platforms they use and they want to keep using those. So I guess if all those platforms say, well, we're not going to use, but I guess we would have to create laws to enforce that, all those platforms can use only curated content. But also, there's so much content, would that mean that all the content will take a while before it appears online because it needs to get curated? Or it's a difficult problem.
Yeah,
exactly.
It reminds me of that movie. I think it's a Bond movie, Tomorrow Never Dies, and you make the news. So yeah, it's something like controlling the world. It's a good thought, but very difficult to implement, I guess, in some levels.
Yeah, and especially in the academic sector, we would love the ideas to control the words, not an external element. So we would really love to see the ideas to confront themselves, and through a healthy debate, then improve naturally, right? Because you don't find really the truth. The truth is something that only philosophers can philosophize about, but they can improve just these ideas. And this is the last thought, and I will leave you with that. What really scares me about technologies is that they boosted the polarization of communities of interest, so that because we are more and more like to join communities, right, in on these social platforms, and the technology favors that me against you, right, kind of ideology. And that's not a healthy environment for ideas to really grow and develop, and really to create a healthy debate, right? I think that from a technological point of view, we should also redesign the technology in a way that really accommodates the societal interests, a bit less the economic interest of creating more clashes because they generate more money, and a bit more of societal interest of having healthy debates, right? So there are some attempts at making these kind of platforms. You see them around, but probably they have the 0.0 something % of the market share. So they are definitely.
So how do those platforms work then? Like how are they different?
I was reading about one in Barcelona that is called oh Jesus, I forgot the name. Anyway, it's a platform developed by by some people in Barcelona and funded by the province of Catalonia. So you can find it probably like that. That was created initially mostly to engage people politically, to, for example, when they wanted to ask something to their city council, for example, right? So to create a new infrastructure for their children, right? So there is this community, and it developed as a platform to have any sort of political or any other debate important for that local community. Right? So it's now apparently pretty popular in Barcelona, but that's all. So right.
But so how does it work? Is it just people say what they think, and then someone goes through their comments, and if it's wrong, they delete it, or I don't know.
It's apparently topic based, but I don't have access to it because I don't live in Barcelona. So you need to be like a resident in Barcelona to have access to it. I just read an article about it, but apparently it's topic-based, so you have to start a sort of, now we would call it a thread on Twitter, but a topic, right, that is related to a problem that you have in your community. And on the basis of that problem, you start a debate, and you can end up by drafting, for example, a law proposal, so a draft law, right? So there are also instruments to write complaints, laws, any sort of proposal to your local government.
I guess if this is like created by the government, then maybe you need like to put your ID and your real name to like access it, and then people cannot just hide behind just being anonymous. And then, because I feel like people, when they are anonymous online, they feel like free, like they can just insult people or say stupid things, and like you'll have no repercussion on them. So I guess maybe it could be a good thing to have like all the social platforms. But I guess you don't want Facebook to have that information about you. So to create maybe like it would need to go through the government or something. But to say that you can actually appear anonymous online, but that if you do something really bad, then they have a way to trace you back. This way you can, because being anonymous also have like some positive aspects. Then you don't want anyone that goes online to know like everything you think about it, but even though you want to share things. But it would be so that, like, I don't know, there would need to be a definition of if you say something completely wrong, or not if you say something completely wrong, because like this cannot be enforced. But I don't know. I feel like there could be something there. Like I cannot really put my mind on that.
Perhaps blockchains.
What? Sorry.
Perhaps blockchains that can be used to. Yeah, you can store your real identity encrypted somewhere, but your interactions with others are anonymized. Maybe something like that. I don't know. Like, but yeah, we should think about that. You gave me also food for thought. Thank you.
That's a good idea. Thanks so much, Claudio. It was fabulous. And the
it
discussion
was really interesting.
Very nice. Yeah, the discussion was also very nice. I do like these thoughts. So yeah, thank you once again. So can I invite you once more in the next year?
It would be lovely. I have, I guess, another couple of projects that could be interesting for you and your faculty members. So if you want, I'll be happy.
We'll keep in touch then. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
you.
Take
Thank you very much,
Bye.
Anthony.
Bye.
And thank you, Laura.
Bye.
Bye then.